When it comes to great dark rides, we often think of those done by Disney or Universal. However, that is not always the case, with some great dark rides being done by outside competitors, like Six Flags over Georgia, who debuted Monsters Mansion, a fantastic dark ride that takes you throughout the stories of the mansion and into the marsh. A ride that initially debuted back in the early 1980s in some form, initially known as Monsters Plantation. And 44 years later, it solos on to be a theme park masterpiece. But why is this the case, and what methods does it use to make it such a great ride all this time? Well, that's a question I aim to answer as we go and analyze this ride, explore why it is such a masterpiece. One of the things that helps make this ride stand out inside the park is that it is different from most of the park's offerings, as unlike the majority of its unthemed rides with minimal to no themed elements, Monsters Mansion is not only highly well themed, but is also an indoor ride unlike the parks, which is mostly made up of roller coasters and other rides that are outdoors in the sun, providing you with a nice indoor break from the sun in a highly themed environment that is also a boat ride, a dying breed due to its high maintenance costs and large scale. Going beyond the showboating is where the ride really shines, as it is made up of several impressive sets and animatronics spread throughout. As wherever you look, you'll always be discovering something new, as there are over 107 animatronics spread throughout the ride. In addition to this, these are not just limited movement animatronics, but rather full-fledged animatronics that aren't just limited in their scope of movements, in which some rides like Rise of Resistance may use several animatronics for the impressive scale, but ultimately have limited movements to them. Monsters Mansion has animatronics that are extremely well detailed while also have a high level of movement to them, helping make them feel like real characters instead of just a prop, while also keeping the environment new and interesting. Likewise, these characters aren't just highlighted at certain areas amongst the ride's paths, but rather constantly being added throughout it, constantly making the area new and interesting. In addition to this, they are not just limited to the left or the right, but rather all around you, with several areas of the ride even taking the characters above you, incorporating them into a way that makes sure that all areas of the ride don't feel left behind. To further extend the ride's show sets, the ride doesn't just have limited areas to them, but rather continues to extend upon them, with several practical effects being spread throughout, like a canyon scene using smoke or jets of water going over the ride paths. When it comes to these scenes though, at the end of the day, they are still just that, a scene in a ride that has walls. And while this can be unfortunate, as it can often hurt areas of the ride, making them feel unnatural, Six Flags uses this to their advantage, often having matte paintings over certain areas of the ride to really extend upon that show scene. But what are these show scenes telling us? Well, that is when it comes to the ride story, the last area in which this ride is really a masterpiece, as it is done in a way to help keep it entertaining, interesting, as well as easy to follow along the ride path. This ride starts with the facade, a great technique often used by many rides, in which an area is done in a way to hide the showboating while also help set up the story and what you're going on inside of it, with this one being themed to a respectable mansion. As while it's not the greatest theming for a mansion, it is a nice touch, especially in a regional theme park that often doesn't have the greatest theming. Upon boarding your ride vehicle throughout the flooded mansion, you're first introduced to the story in which you'll find yourself going into a picnic. A story that is helped set up by some of the main characters, helping introduce themselves into who they are, as well as how they will be important figures for you to follow amongst the ride paths. In addition to this, there is also some clever foreshadowing of how the ride could end up. From there, you make your way along the ride path into several areas in which you get immersed inside the picnic in this wonderful town, before things ultimately do end up turning awry as you go into the marsh, before ultimately being rescued, with a few more delightful scenes before one jump scare to end your great experience throughout this flooded mansion. all of which was done so in a way to help keep the ride entertaining, exciting, and interesting throughout it, helping break up different areas with different vibes along the way, as well as having a continual story for you to tell and follow. Likewise, such areas are also enchanted through several lighting effects. This technique is a great way to really enchant certain areas of the ride, with certain areas feeling more joyful and setting a more positive vibe, while others having more eerie tale. Likewise, such lighting wasn't always static, whether it be the spotlight illustrating the darkness and unknown of the marsh, or the flickering lights of the lanterns of Billy Bob Reader. To also help keep this ride interesting and exciting over the years and decades, Six Flags has been continually adding new effects as well as keeping the old ones updated, with the ride going through a major refurbishment in 2008 where it was renamed from Monsters Plantation to Monsters Mansion, which opened in 2009, which followed a very similar premise except with updated sets, scenery, as well as incorporating new technology into the aging ride, helping keep it new and exciting for decades of generations to come. This, though, was not the first time in which the ride faced a major overhaul, as the ride was previously known even before Monsters Plantation, which opened in 1981, as Tales of the Okie Vinoki, a ride that opened with the park back in 1967. While this ride was drastically different from Monsters Plantation and eventually Monsters Mansion, one thing that remains consistent throughout is that certain animatronics, as well as areas of the ride theming, were done in a way in which Six Flags could continually update and change them throughout, helping add to a bigger ride in scale and story in the end, having less capital expenditure upfront, as you always have these little things in which you can constantly build upon and improve, helping save you money as well as increase your return on investment. Lastly, Six Flags also has an increased return on investment when it comes to the ride itself, as unlike some of their other rides in which they are paying licensing fees for, this ride utilizes original characters, helping save them money while also increasing a new fandom for it to grow and sell merchandise for. Unfortunately, though, despite this ride being popular today, as well as containing a drastically indifferent and popular ride experience, Six Flags has yet to clone it into any of its other parks. But why is this? Well, it ultimately comes down to its scale, as well as huge costs, as due to the ride's building initially being built back in 1967, as well as the continual updates and improvements made to the ride throughout its years, making such a ride from the ground up is not only huge in scale, but also extremely pricey. In addition to this, it doesn't have a modern IP for guests to go and connect to, something that Six Flags sadly no longer values anymore, often choosing modern IP over new, unique, and original ones. Despite this though, in a way, it is what makes this ride almost even more magical, as due to its unlikely nature to ever get a clone, it makes Six Flags Over Georgia a unique destination worth the visit alone just to experience some of these old classics. As well, the park itself may not be worth the greatest value, Six Flags Over Georgia helps make it worth that value through these fantastic dark rides like this and Justice League Battle for Metropolis, a new ride that will tackle sometime in the future, both of which offer a great, unique, and different experience for the park and is something that it drastically needs, and I really hope that Six Flags in the end does choose to invest more into it, unlike unthemed roller coasters, which while thrilling, ultimately offer a subpar experience, helping make Monsters Mansion an even better ride that I'm glad has existed this long.